country, yet the arms are used there. Your opinion, please.
So, I mean, the first point to make is that the committees on arms export controls in the House of Commons doesn't actually have any say in the exports. So this is a committee that existed until about 18 months, 2 years ago. And then in the last parliament, the committee actually fell apart, because when the issue of Saudi Arabia and arms sales to Saudi Arabia was raised, the majority of MPs on the committee said that it was inappropriate to raise the issue of Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia was an important ally of the United Kingdom, and therefore the committee shouldn't address issues of Saudi Arabia. So the committee couldn't agree on that, and it fell apart. It's been reconstituted in the current parliament, but on the unwritten proviso that it doesn't discuss arms sales to Saudi Arabia and the Emirates.
What's an unwritten proviso?
That the main parties and their members on the committee have informally agreed. So in other words...
Isn't that corruption?
Of course it's corruption. Especially given the reality that Graham Jones, the Labour MP who chairs the committee, has been known to have made a whole series of visits to Saudi Arabia at the expense of the Saudi government over the past few years, even while he's been chairing the committee. So, of course it's corruption. That's corruption that is not much different to the fact that Jacob Zuma, the South African former president, faced 783 counts of fraud, corruption and racketeering in relation to the South African arms deal. It's corruption in the same way that Tony Blair has made tens of millions of pounds out of contracts directly related to the invasion of Iraq, which he oversaw.
So he's received bribes?
Well, they are effectively bribes. They're what I suppose, if you wanted to be technical, you would call delayed bribes. So, for instance, there's a South Korean oil services firm that pays him millions of pounds a year for nothing in particular. Coincidentally, after the invasion of Iraq, this was the same company that won the contract to restructure and rebuild the destroyed oil infrastructure in British-controlled Basra. But I'm sure the two things have absolutely nothing to do with each other. So what is actually needed? The committees on arms export control are really a sort of a toothless post-fact entity in Parliament. What is really needed is a profoundly different approach to arms exports in the United Kingdom. So you need a system whereby Parliament, as our representatives, actually have a say in who to grant licenses to and who not to grant licenses to. In addition to which, it is absolutely essential that the application for licenses should be public knowledge, so that members of the public, if they're opposed to those arms deals going ahead, are able to take legal action to try and stop the licensing of those arms exports. At the moment, none of that is possible. So at the moment, the system of arms export control in the United Kingdom and virtually every country in the world is simply a charade.
Yes.
It's all in secret, the decisions are all made in...
Of course they are. They're made at an executive level in secret. And to show you just how absurd they are, we wrote a report. When I say we, I have a tiny organization called Corruption Watch. And you can see on our website, cw-uk.org, or just Google Corruption Watch UK. We, for instance, did a report on this extraordinary deal when Norway was selling 4 second-hand armed gunboats. The Norwegians knew they were selling these boats to a Nigerian warlord. How do we know they knew that? Well, representatives of the Nigerian warlord had twice visited the foreign ministry in Oslo and signed the visitor's book. Even though the official involved, who is now in jail having accepted, I think, 200,000 euros or something in bribes, claimed that they didn't know the boats were going to Nigeria. He met with these guys and arranged the deals. They instead claimed that the boats were being sold to the United Kingdom. And there is this very dodgy British company that barely exists. So if you go to the address that the company is supposed to have its premises at, it's a meadow with no building of any sort in it. And this company, which has been involved in a number of these sorts of deals, claimed it was buying the ships from Norway and then on-exporting them to the Nigerian warlord, even though the Nigerians did the deal with the Norwegians directly. So when Vince Cable was business secretary in the coalition government, this deal came to him. Now, the important thing to realize is they were being sold to a warlord in the Niger Delta, which is a dreadful history of conflict. And this warlord had stated publicly on a number of occasions, before this arms deal was approved, that if his candidate, Goodluck Jonathan, didn't win the Nigerian presidential election, he would restart hostilities in the Niger Delta, where there was effectively a civil war. So this, in terms of British legislation, in terms of European legislation, means that the UK should not license this export because it's likely to lead to enhanced conflict. Cable, in response to questions we put to him, said that the matter was considered and no evidence was found that should stop the granting of the export license. And so Britain went ahead. Now, our embassy in Nigeria is unable to establish this fact, that me, sitting in Belsize Park in North London, I can establish that fact. Our Department of International Business or Trade, or whatever it's been renamed to, now it's under Liam Fox, can't establish the fact that this warlord has threatened to restart the civil war, but I can establish it. I mean, my organization comprises of 4 people. We have an annual budget of £100,000. My guess is that the Department of International Business probably has a slightly bigger budget and slightly more people available to it. But they can't establish this information. That's not the point. The point is that there is no political will in this country or any other country on the planet to have a properly regulated trade in weapons. That's the bottom line. And why is that the case? Because if we have a choice of war or diplomacy, 99% of the time we choose war. How do we know that? Well, amongst other things, the United States of America employs more people to run one aircraft carrier than it has diplomats across the entire world. Today, the US has 11 aircraft carriers.
Who would have got the money from the Nigerian purchase then? Who would have got the bribe there?
Well, in the instances there, we know, because it's been proved in court, that a bribe was paid to the Norwegian Foreign Ministry official who approved the deal.
Oh.
So that was a very direct example of bribes.
Britain...
Were there bribes paid to other people, maybe politicians, to other officials? Were bribes paid to people in the United Kingdom? We don't know. We don't have evidence of that. We don't have proof of that. But let me tell you, in the 17 years I've been doing this work, I haven't examined every arms deal that's happened in the world. But of all of them that I've examined, I have never come across an arms deal that doesn't contain some element of illegality, which is probably why the trade in weapons, which isn't that big a trade in the world, accounts for 40% of all corruption in all global trade.